listening to Radio Maria, a Christian voice in your home. We're now continuing with Find Something More, Find Your Way Home with Kendra and Christine.
Thank you, Vicky. Hi, Christine. How are you doing in these crazy times?
Oh, things are perfectly normal. The world is normal. The church is normal. How are you?
I'm doing fabulous because I got Jesus. I got Jesus in my back
Amen.
pocket.
Amen,
Amen.
sister.
Amen.
All right. All right
All
now.
right. We're going to talk about some exciting stuff today. Last week, we talked about the Eucharist and how we are so thirsty, so hungry for the churches to be open. I miss daily Mass so much. And this week, we are going to talk about Eucharistic miracles. Jesus's body, blood, soul, and divinity, scientifically proven in many miracles across the world. So this was a moment of realization for me on my journey, my very first week. And I'm talking to everyone out there who has no real idea what this Catholic Church is all about, no real idea what the purpose of Mass is, and maybe bored with Mass. Maybe you're just kind of going through the motions, because when I went back in 2013 on Easter, all by myself, nobody in my family was going, I responded to the priest when he said, "Peace be with you." And I said, "And also with you." It had been 20 plus years since I had been to any kind of church service. And you could go listen to our previous broadcasts on that. You can look at the book, Am I Catholic? I have it in Audible format, tells my story, but I had no clue what the faith was about. I had no clue what the Eucharist was. As a matter of fact, what I was doing was looking up, okay, I just made a fool out of myself at Mass because nobody was saying, "and also with you." By the way, if you're going to go back to Mass and you don't, you haven't been there in a while, they don't say, "Peace be with you," and also with you. They say,
They
"and with
say,
your
how you
spirit."
doing?
Yeah, right. What's up?
What's
That's what they
up?
say.
Let's
What's
teach them
up?
wrong. That'll be terrible.
Right? So I had to look it up. Mind you, it is 2 days after Sunday, and I look up the Mass online, and I come to this weird word, Eucharist. Don't know what the Eucharist is. I also don't know who Jesus is, by the way. At this point in time, I just think Jesus is God's son. I don't know that he is God. And oddly enough, I still don't even know why Jesus died for us. He was crucified. Why? This is how this is how catechized I was, just sharing with the world. So I am my first day after decades of being away, my first week of being in the church in 2013, and I stumble across Eucharistic miracles. And I just start reading, and I was floored. First, I was shocked because I realized, oh my gosh, this is supposed to be the real body, blood, soul, and divinity. And I didn't even know what that really meant at the time, of Jesus. And that's the purpose of the Mass, the consecration, that it only comes from the ordained hands of the priest. And all this stuff was all new to me. It was a whole nother language. I didn't even know what the Eucharist was. It means Thanksgiving, but it is the Holy Communion between us and our sacrifice and giving ourselves up to the Lord. And then I realized, whoops, I damned myself. I condemned myself to hell because I received the Lord on Easter after not going to confession for 26 years with many mortal sins on my soul. So I have to say, holy moly, what an eye opener. And I don't know about your journey, because yours was, it had to have been a moment of what, when you found out about the Eucharist, being an atheist. How did you feel when you first came across this beautiful fact in the church and in Mass in the church?
I was granted a lot of faith. I guess it was just a supernatural grace to believe without questioning. I can't really explain that. I did make my first Eucharistic faux pas when I was first introduced to the faith, and I had it was an experience of a huge miracle. I'm not supposed to be alive. You can listen to my story in one of our very first episode, right? I believe on queenofpeacemedia.com. But I was on the East Coast and I didn't know the difference between churches. I didn't know why everyone was getting in line, but I walked up and thought, why are they putting their hands out? What's up there? What's going on? And I had this little round thing in my hand, didn't know what it was. I was, yeah, a
That's insane.
clueless stranger in a strange land in my first experience of the Eucharist. But I did believe, and we have a great show for you today because we are going to tell you about some of the Eucharistic miracles that have happened, and a lot of them have happened in the last few decades. Many, many. It's as though Jesus is saying, this is me. And what we're finding out is that over and over again, because now we have science that can study these miracles, is that the characteristics physically of the Eucharist, meaning the body and blood of Jesus in the form of what looks like a piece of bread and what looks and tastes like wine and bread, is not actually wine and bread. And it's a leap of faith that a lot of Catholics, we've discovered in a Pew Research poll that it's 70% don't understand or believe this. And yet, Jesus has given us empirical proof that it's not what it looks like. He makes it look like what it actually is to prove that this is my body. This is my blood. And not only that, across the world and across time, when these have been studied by science, it's the same blood type, AB blood type. It's the same part of the body. It's the heart, but it's specifically is it the left ventricle?
Left ventricle. Mm-hmm.
It is the part of the heart that pumps out the purified, fresh, oxygenated blood into the body. OMG.
Right? I just got total God bumps. This is going to be such an awesome show. I can't wait to share.
Can you believe it, people? Please believe it, people. Please believe it. And I'm going to share the first Eucharistic miracle. And of course, the heart, right? What does the heart mean? The heart is him saying, I love you. Why would he choose to have, and that's the same blood type, by the way, AB blood type that was found on the Shroud of Turin. Okay. Yep. And
it's the universal blood type for anyone to receive blood from the AB positive.
Oh, that's very interesting. So the first Eucharistic miracle that has been documented is in Lanciano, Italy. And that was in 750 AD. And it wasn't studied until 1970, more than 1,200 years later. Scientists did a thorough study. And guess how thorough this study was? 500 studies by the World Health Organization. I don't quite understand that. 500 studies. Maybe they just kept finding things they didn't want to see. So they kept, right. I don't know why someone does 500 studies, but that's what they did. And the experience was a priest at the moment of saying Mass had terrible, terrible doubts. He suddenly didn't believe that this was actually the real presence of Jesus Christ, body and blood. And what happened was it became human blood and it became flesh. To this day, in Lanciano, Italy, there are globules, they're circular tissues. The host is human muscular striated tissue of the myocardium, the left ventricle, plus flesh from arteries, veins, and a branch of the vagus nerve and adipose tissue. And like the blood, the flesh is also fresh. These tissues are still 21, it's more years than that now, hundreds of years later, is also fresh living tissue because it responds as rapidly to all the clinical reactions distinctive of a living being. So when a scientist investigates it every single time, it acts alive. And most remarkably, this is a very unique Eucharistic miracle in that the blood is divided into 5 unequal sized parts. Okay, but when weighed individually, each part weighs exactly the same, even though they're a different mass. Each part weighs 15.85 grams. Not only that, when they collectively weigh all of the 5 blood globules together, they all collectively weigh 15.85 grams. So I love this. This is what the final statement of the World Health Organization. It says in its results in 1976, science, aware of its limits, has come to a halt, face to face with the impossibility of giving an explanation. So it's hard to imagine the UN would get involved with a religious miracle nowadays, let alone admitting such defeat. But that's indeed what happened. And so that is the first documented Eucharistic miracle. And there are many other fantastic, real things we can share. Do you have a favorite, Kendra?
I do, and it's because of the Pope that we have today. So I actually will Christine will put the link to a blog that I did, which was Eucharistic Miracles. And in this blog will be links to other websites with multiple miracles, in addition to the one that I'm going to share with you. But there's also one on Church Pop website, which has a cute little cartoon for kids, so they can really kind of understand the true miracle in what we are receiving every time we go to Mass. Okay, so mine is about 1996. I wanted to pick, again, something that was recent for me. In Buenos Aires, Argentina, on August 18th, 1996, Father Alejandro Pezet was saying Holy Mass. And he was done distributing Holy Communion, and a woman came up to him and said, "Hey, I found a discarded host on a candle holder in the back of the church. So I'm going to stop here right now and talk to anybody who is either not Catholic or don't understand the precious beauty of this sacrament. So if you're at a funeral or you're at a wedding, do not put the host in the Bible or in the missal. Don't throw it on the pew. This is Jesus, and we handle this in a very specific way. So even if you're walking up to receive the Lord and he accidentally falls out of your hand or out of your mouth, it's a big deal. Jesus just dropped on the floor. So you will have a process that the priest will go through, probably wiping it up. I've seen this actually in my life, lick the floor and make sure that every bit of particle of Jesus that could have come off of the host is consumed. So it is a defiled, as they call it, host. So he cannot consume it. He has to put it into a glass of water. Just a plain old glass of water right out of the tap, y'all. Nothing like, formaldehyde or even distilled water at this time. So this was August 18th. And then on August 26th, he opened up the tabernacle, which is where he stored the host, and it turned into a bloody substance. So he freaked out, obviously. It doesn't say that in the thing, but I'm sure he freaked out. Called Cardinal Jorge Bergoglio, who is, or was at the time, the Arch Auxiliary Bishop. He's now Pope Francis, for those who don't know. And so he said, okay, the host must be photographed. And so the pictures were taken on September 6th. So we go from August 18th to the 26th to September 6th. That have shown that it has become bloodied flesh, and it grew significantly in size. And so this was kept in strict confidence for several years, and the host was remaining in the tabernacle. And now this time it was actually moved into distilled water, but still no preservatives, no formaldehyde. So 3 years later, on October 5th in 1999, basically said, okay, we have to have someone take a look at this. So they took it to Dr. Castanon. He took a sample of the bloody fragment and sent it to New York for analysis. Now, they didn't tell anyone in New York what this was about. They didn't want to influence anything, so they purposefully kept it just anonymous. Here's some stuff, go study it, right? Not that this is a consecrated host. So Dr., and I'm going to butcher his name, I'm sure, Frederick Zugibe, Zugibe, who's a well-known cardiologist and a forensic pathologist, determined that it was real flesh and blood containing human DNA. And so I'm going to read this quote because it's amazing. He testified, this doctor, the analyzed material is a fragment of the heart muscle found in the wall of the left ventricle close to the valves. This muscle is responsible for the contraction of the heart. It should be borne in mind that the left cardiac ventricle pumps blood to all parts of the body. The heart muscle in this is in inflammatory condition and contains a large number of white blood cells. This indicates that the heart was alive at the time the sample was taken. Remember, this is flesh in a cup of water, the consecrated host, and it's alive. The doctor goes on to say, it is my contention that the heart was alive since white blood cells die outside a living organism. They require a living organism to sustain them. Thus, their presence indicates that the heart was alive when the sample was taken. What is more, these white blood cells had penetrated the tissue, which further indicates that the heart had been under severe stress, as if the owner had been beaten severely about the chest. Okay, so just take that all in for a moment here. And I want to say there were two Australians. One was a journalist and one was a lawyer who witnessed these tests. And they knew where the sample came from. So they were kind of dumbfounded by what the doctor was telling them. And so one of the scientists asked, how long can the white blood cells remain alive if they come from a piece of human tissue which is kept in water? And the doctor said they would cease to exist in a matter of minutes. So the journalist then told the doctor that the source of the sample had been kept in ordinary water for a month, and then for another 3 years in a container of distilled water. And then only was the sample taken for analysis at that time. And so he was, of course, the doctor, flabbergasted. That can't be possible, at least not scientifically possible. So there was no way of explaining what had happened. And at the end, this is what the doctor said in conclusion. How and why a consecrated host would change its character and become living human flesh and blood will remain an inexplicable mystery to science, a mystery totally beyond her competence. And in this article that we'll put the link in there, again, there's other links to different stuff that you can check out, but that was phenomenal to me because I love how, Catholicism and Christianity is not against science. I mean, there's a great bond and a great match there. So that is my in particular favorite one that I wanted to bring to the world. Wow. And
what was so striking is in Sokolka, Poland, and Legnica, Poland in 2008, and again, the other one in 2013. In those as well, they found that the heart tissue, again, of the left ventricle was inflamed, and there was evidence of trauma from the presence of thrombi, indicating repeated lack of oxygen. And these scientists are saying the person who had this heart was struggling with every breath to breathe, and that the lesions present in the muscle showed rapid cardiac spasms typical in the final phases of death. So all that was revealed in this scientific test. And I think one of the things that we forget is that Eucharistic adoration in addition to receiving the Lord and being well prepared to receive him, are transformative for us.
Hey, can you just tell people what Eucharistic adoration is? Because I will say there was one point in my journey I had no clue what that was.
Eucharistic adoration is when the host, meaning the bread of life, meaning Jesus's body, in the form of a host, which looks like a round wafer, sometimes small, sometimes about an inch or inch and a half in diameter, and sometimes much larger. Is placed,
those are amazing. I've seen one that's almost as big as your head, and I was like, "What?" That was pretty wild.
My head, that's huge. Yeah,
as big as your face.
So that host is put in what's called a monstrance, which is a holder, often ornate and beautiful, often in the shape of a sun, but it doesn't have to be, and a stand that goes on an altar. And that's where it's called adoration, because one of the purposes of placing Jesus on the altar in this way is to adore him, to give him adoration. And I think it's not well known or understood that simply being in his presence, sitting before him in this form and praying changes us. We receive more of his love, his intelligence, his healing, himself. People, when he walked the earth, when he was around them, if they were open to him, they left never the same. Obviously, this is true of the apostles, who left everything behind because of his presence and what he said. He was so powerful and so loving that they left everything behind to come and follow him. So that is who is in front of us in adoration. And there's a beautiful book. This is a church-approved ministry from Direction for Our Times. And in 2017, they became a private association of the faithful. And it came from a mystic she goes by the name Anna Nuzzo.Welcome. And she is bishop approved. She lives in Ireland. She's an American woman. And there are several volumes of what heaven has said to her. She receives what's called locutions, where she hears voices of Jesus or Mary, sometimes the saints. I'm going to hold this up. This is one of my favorite volumes. It's simply called Volume 2. And if you go to directionforourtimes.com and you find this edifying, you can get all of her books, which I highly recommend. I'm one of those really picky readers who only wants to hear it from the horse's mouth. So I would never read one of my books. No.
Your books are great.
You're awesome. Thanks. I'll give you the money later. So I wanna read this. This is a message from Jesus on August 18th, 2003, because in this book that I mentioned, Volume 2, it's called Conversations with the Eucharistic Heart of Jesus. So he's speaking from the tabernacle. And so taking this book to adoration, or taking spiritual reading to adoration, or your rosary, or silence, these are all options. You know, the options for prayer, mental prayer, it's all endless of what you can do. But this is a particularly powerful thing to do, because these are words that he actually is speaking from the tabernacle. I want to show my children the great devotion I have for them. I reside in tabernacles all over the world. I do this because I desire my children to have a living Christ in their midst. Such holiness is available to souls who visit and venerate me in the Eucharist. I am the cure for every ill. I am the calm for every storm. Don't we need that now? Mm-hmm. I am the comfort for every sorrow. Because I intend to lead my children in a more enhanced way, I'm going to show you the life that is enclosed in each tabernacle. My dear ones, if you but knew the value of each and every visit that is made to me here, There would be crowds all through every day and every night. It is this crowd of souls I invite now. Dear children of this world, I, your Jesus, am not limited by the laws of nature. I can do anything. My powers are unimaginable to souls who have not seen the heavenly vision. In other words, to souls who remain on earth. So he speaks, and it's beautiful. And there are saints and mystics who have lived solely on the Eucharist. They've haven't had anything else to eat for years and years and years. So when he says that he's true food and he's true drink, he means that in more ways than one. So,
and why we hunger and thirst for him during the times when we were in lockdown and quarantine and not able to receive him. I was changed. I know you were changed. For those of you who haven't watched the episode right before this one, go to Queen of Peace Media on YouTube and watch it. It's about the Eucharist and Mass being pretty much taken away from us. And it's emotional and it's deep. And that's why we wanted to talk about the true miracle, because and proof scientifically for those who do not realize what they have at Mass. Those who wake up and they're like, I just want to go back to bed, or I'm too tired to go to Mass, or it's boring and you don't know what it's all about. Well, you are receiving Jesus Christ when you walk up, hopefully in a state of grace. And if you're not, get your tail to confession, because you should not receive the Lord, our God, in any other way than a state of grace. And it is beautiful. I've had such transformation through the Eucharist. I mean, there have been times when I've received him, I've gone back to my pew and I am like bawling my eyes out, uncontrollable Holy Spirit gift of tears. My body is almost like resting in itself, and I just am in awe. I know that daily Mass and the receiving of Jesus into my body every single day is so necessary. I know when I don't have him in me, I know things are changing. I know we can do spiritual communion. I know Jesus is around us all the time. The Holy Spirit lives within us, but to receive the Eucharist is a game changer for me. And I know that you feel the same way, because you bawled your eyes out on the last episode, and it just touched my heart. I totally could relate to the pain that you felt of not receiving him.
Yeah, well, I think the pain I felt, definitely I feel pain for not receiving him, but the pain I felt in my heart last episode felt universal. It felt like Jesus's pain, because he can't give himself to us.
Right.
And that's why he died, to give himself to us and forgive us our sins, wash us with love and mercy. And when we don't come to him, or we say, oh, now you're online, he hurts. And I think his pain is so much greater than ours. And we're going to talk about some of the people who were able to fall in love to the degree that he's in the Eucharist. That's all they needed, and that's all they lived on, and who some of those people are. Also, some of the miracles of what happens when the Eucharist is simply processed by. So we want to encourage the faithful. Please understand who this is, not what this is, but who this is. Run back to church. Be safe, but run. And be happy that we still have in some places on earth him. He may be taken away again. Do not take him for granted. This is Kendra and Christine on Radio Maria at Find Something More. Find your way home. We'll be right back.
Thank you for listening to Radio Maria, a Christian voice in your home. We're now returning to Find Something More, Find Your Way Home with Kendra and Christine.
Okay, we are back. Thank you for sticking with us. We are going to get into some of the holy people. They could be mystics, they could be servants of God, they could be ready for beatification and or sainthood who have lived on the Eucharist. I can't imagine, because I struggle with just fasting occasionally here and there. And these are people who are so in love with the Lord and so they're not all necessarily victim souls, but they understand the suffering and the desire to save souls. So go ahead and talk about your first one, because I don't know much about her and I'm anxious myself to hear a little bit.
So I learned about, I'd never heard of this first woman, servant of God, which means she's on the track for sainthood, Martha Robin, and she was nurtured by the Eucharist alone for 53 years. That's all. Just half a century.
Yeah. Older than I am right now.
I'm no comment on my part about myself.
You're very close. You're not far.
So this French philosopher, Jean Guiton, you like the way I said that? Jean Guiton left us a forceful witness, thank you, on Martha Robin. And so she was a French peasant, and she basically said these words. She offered herself up as a victim soul. So she already lived the pains of the Passion starting at age 23. In the year 1925, and then she offered herself as a victim of love, and then 5 years later in 1930 she began to live the Passion really intensely. Yeah, she wasn't able to drink or eat, and she accepted all of her sufferings for the love of Jesus. And she said, the one thing that cures, comforts, lifts, blesses is the Eucharist. He's my everything. So, she has this, in 1928, after a serious neurological illness, Martha found it almost impossible to move, especially to swallow, because those muscles were affected. Moreover, she had an eye illness that left her pretty much blind. So she was already that sick, and then offered herself up more.
That's insane.
So, and she just, in an era of television and widespread knowledge, she just lived in her peasant home her whole life, and the world didn't know about her. And it's people like her that are keeping the world going, these victim souls who are nothing but love. And without loving Jesus that much, a life like that doesn't make sense to the rest of the world. It just looks like folly. It looks like a mistake. It looks like a wasted life, and it was hardly that. So
I wonder how many people will be in heaven saying thank you for your prayers. Thank you for your suffering. You saved me, because I don't know who brought me back, because I was in the pits of hell.
I didn't know if anyone was praying for me for most of my life. I didn't know. I mean, they intercede. They hold back God's justice. They pour mercy upon this world. They gain souls every second of their life because they are suffering, but suffering with love, which brings them joy. So it's a mystery how suffering can be someone's joy, but it is when one reaches that degree of love. And so that's the goal for all of us, folks. And I don't do well with my migraines, so I am not the greatest example. But
I'm with you.
But that still is the goal. That still is the goal. For 36 years, the only nourishment that a German mystic named Teresa Neumann received was the Holy Eucharist. So she's another one. Starting Thursday, she would bleed profusely through Sunday. and experience the Passion. And this was during the time of Hitler's regime, and the Nazi authorities during World War II withdrew her food rationing card because she didn't eat, and gave her a double rationing of soap to wash her towels and clothing, because every Friday she'd just be so drenched in blood while she was in this altered state. And
Wow.
so I read that an average of 2,000 visitors unannounced would come by her to see her bleed or to ask. She had mystical revelations, so they'd come by her home every week. And Hitler was actually scared of her because she was vocal against the Nazi regime. So she was quite the mystic. And so that was her food. And this is a beautiful statement. You know, we say, why do people live that way? Why does that happen? There's all sorts of reasons. Like we said, definitely the salvation of the world. But ecclesiastical authorities performed many examinations in regard to Teresa's continuous fasting. Karl Strater, S.J., directed by the Bishop of Ratisbon, studied and examined the life of the stigmatized Teresa and confirmed, quote unquote, the significance of Teresa Neumann's fasting is to show the people of the world the value of the Holy Eucharist, to make the world understand that Christ is actually present in the bread of the Eucharist, and that through the Holy Eucharist, physical life can actually be preserved. And you know, there are people who have understood this so fully that they were willing to risk their lives for it. And people know of Archbishop Fulton Sheen. They may not know that he made a vow that he would spend an hour in adoration, as I mentioned, in the presence of the consecrated host every day. And he said, the reason why I have a ministry that is powerful and helps people is all because of that hour that I spend with him. All of it comes from him, and I receive everything from him. And he made that vow because he heard of a true story when in about 1949, when the communist regime took over China, there was a young schoolgirl, and her priest was always wondering when the communist soldiers came in if he might be shot. He didn't know. Things were peaceful for a while. They'd just walk by stone-faced and not do anything. But one day they burst into his classroom with the children. The soldiers said, they started ripping off crucifixes from the wall. They said to the children, gather all your statues and we're going to come into the bathroom and flush them down the toilet. And there was a little girl at her school desk putting her head down, and she wouldn't do it. And the soldier got angrier and angrier and angrier and went over to her desk, started yelling at her and berating at her, and she wouldn't move. And she wouldn't move, and she said, I'm going to get your father. And he told the other soldiers to find her father. They hauled everyone into the church. They made an example of the father and hauled him off. And then they said, you still believe this craziness? You still believe that there's something special in there? And they busted open the tabernacle, and the soldiers forcefully threw the body of Christ, the hosts, on the ground and started stomping on them and say, see, nothing's happening, nothing's happening. And they just kept stomping. And then the priest was there, and they hauled him off, and they locked him into a coal-burning room and kept him there under lock and key. And there was a little window outside which he could see that after everyone left, the little girl remained. And she just knelt, and she just stared at the hosts on the ground. And after a while, a beautiful woman came in and said, oh, honey, what have these men done? Can you come with me? And she left. So day and night, the priest was locked in there. And every morning, this little girl would come back. She would kneel down, stick out her tongue, and take one of the hosts into her body to receive Jesus. And then she'd straighten up with her hands in a prayer position and pray and then leave. And so the priest was so moved by this action, this risky action that she was taking, that he'd hear a little noise and he'd wonder if it was her. And sure enough, the next morning she'd come, and he can't count how many times she did this.
Wow.
Until the last time that she did it. She came in, she knelt down, and there was a noise, a loud noise at the door, and there were shots. And they shot at her, and she was struggling to get up after receiving the Eucharist, and she held her hands like this with a great struggle and fell back and hit her head on the ground with a loud sound and died.
Wow.
And the priest heard a noise, and that same soldier that had been part of the commotion, I'm not sure if he's the one that killed her or not, released the priest from his place of bondage and said, "You can go." And he immediately ran to the girl and hugged her, gave her a proper burial. And then that soldier said, if all the Catholics were like this little girl, no communist soldier would be able to go after them.
Wow.
So that priest lived to tell this story, and that story lived to go into the heart of Archbishop Fulton Sheen. And so that's what made her do that. It was Jesus. And somehow that little girl knew that doing that was more important than her physical life. So when we know that, the Eucharist changes everything.
Mm-hmm.
It changes everything. And it changes how we go to Mass. Do we do the little tiny sacrifice of an hour of fasting before receiving Him? Or is it too hard? Is it too hard? Or do we say, I'm not sure I believe. I know you've given me all that proof. Or as we said in the last show, do we suddenly think that by not supplying it, we're helping people?
Or are we attending Mass, looking at our watch, waiting for it to be over so that we can check the box that we went for our Sunday obligation? So, I mean, I've been there for all of these things that we've said, by the way. There's no judgment.
And I'm guilty too. There are times when I just run in late. I don't prepare well. I haven't succeeded in getting my family to do the fast. It's too much of a fight. I'm distracted. There's so many things that are hard. And there's so many things I think when people leave and go to a different church, it's understandable because it's more exciting. The music's better. Maybe the preaching's better. It's more comfy seats. There's so many reasons why people are like, that Mass is quote unquote dead. There's nothing, there's no juice in it. There's nothing. I'm not being fed. That is true in terms of if we are looking at the exteriors. If we're looking at the exteriors and we don't like the music, we don't like the preaching, we don't like the hard seats, we don't like our community, there's a 1,000 reasons we can come up with why the Mass isn't right.
Yeah.
But it's always the same Jesus. And if we're predisposed to receive Him in that boring Mass, we are receiving God Himself.
Yep. And you could even look at all those things and call them little sacrifices through your, participation in the Mass and offering those up. And, I get it. We've all been there. We've probably been there too many times with that. But it's not an entertainment hour. It's a
No, we're
worship
so used to
hour.
that. It's our
I
culture
didn't get
too. It's
anything
our
out of it.
culture.
Well,
I
you're
didn't
not
get it.
supposed to. You're supposed to give yourself. You are sacrificing and offering yourself to the Lord, and then emptying yourself and receiving him in your body. And a lot of times, based on our disposition, we block the graces that he is just so desperately wanting to give us because of where our mind is, because we were late, we didn't read the readings, we didn't prepare, we didn't get there early, we didn't stay late. And I'm not wagging my finger at anyone because I've been there, done that. But it has been one of those things where I think, especially now with it being taken away, I will never take it for granted.
Mm-mm.
And there were days when I was like, I'm a little tired to be going to mass this morning. He'll understand. And it's like, what are you now? I look at myself like, wow, look at the times that you just took for granted, him being available. Where I am at, I could have, I don't know, 7 different masses every single day to receive the Lord. And I'm just not going to do it today because I got other things to do. It's insanity to me now. So this has been one good thing in my faith walk that has just slapped me upside the head is I'm trying to find out where I can actually receive the Lord on Sunday Mass, now that things are slowly but surely opening. So what a gift. I encourage everyone who's listening or who will watch this on YouTube, do your own, just Google Eucharistic miracles, and there will be tons of them. Carlos
Acutis. You can go to realpresence.org. www.realpresence.org is a beautiful site. And one of my son, who's just turned 16, his favorite saint, who is a young boy, died recently. On his way to sainthood, he put together a website of Eucharistic miracles, and he loved the Lord, starting at age 7 from receiving an experience of Jesus in the Eucharist. The kids receive experiences. And so my son calls on Carlos Acutis, Acutis, for all sorts of help. And he just helped us with this show because I went on his website to find out about some Eucharistic miracles. So thank you, Carlos. And
Amen.
So shall we close with a prayer for the listeners?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Lord Jesus, please penetrate everyone's heart, everyone who you are calling to come to you in the Eucharist. Call out to them now. Through your Holy Spirit, send forth your love and gently grab the hearts of your faithful and woo them into yourself. Woo them into the Eucharist, so that even if they are living in a place where they cannot receive you, where they cannot adore you, where they cannot be with you in that very physical way, still have the hearts of your faithful who burn to be with you remain a living and on fire witness to this truth, that when you were alive and you were on earth and you said, "This is my body given up for you, do this in memory of me," you were saying just that and commanding us to do so until the end of time. Thank you for listening. And this is Kendra and Christine on Radio Maria. May you find something more, and may you find your way home. God bless you.
Come.